Welcome to WTF Fantasy Football with Jim Day, Tony Cincotta. You can join us every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 1 hour of fantasy football. It is week 4 of the fantasy football season coming up on us. Jim, can you believe this is going to be the week where we're going to see some cuts? We'll get a couple surprises, but no major hints here. Maybe some cost-cutting moves by teams. So far, what we see in preseason, if you're one of the it changes things, boys, out there. Nothing should sway us in week 4.
Yeah, no, it's we didn't learn much in week 3. We're definitely not going to learn much in week 4. Teams definitely sat more starters in week 3 than we're used to seeing. So we didn't really get much information out of week 3 at all, something that usually in the past gave us a ton of information.
You know what's crazy? And we always say a lot of things like, seems like every year we say, oh, I can't believe the amount of injuries in preseason. I think it's been that bad this year, but I think it's been the lamest preseason. Like there's been no real injuries, no big moves. I think it's just been a quiet preseason, which actually is a benefit to fantasy football drafters.
Well, it's a benefit in a certain way in that, you know, no big injuries. We definitely had fewer injuries this preseason than I can remember in the last few. So that's a good thing. But it's also bad in that it really didn't solve a lot of mysteries that we had coming in to preseason, like like the Jets receiving core. Who's going to be the guy there? Who's going to really be behind DJ Hilton and Indy? Things like that. We just don't know yet.
Here's the crazy part. So this is going to take us way off course in the start, and this wasn't anything I planned to talk about. But you led me down a narrow straight. I watched the Jets-Giants game, right? With the situation with Saquon Barkley just standing there on the sideline, hamstring injury, it gets to the point where Barkley comes out, didn't even practice much at Penn State, so this is nothing he's not used to. Is Wayne Gallman more than a handcuff? Is he a guy you can draft when you get later in the drafts at this point in that Giants backfield?
Well,
but Jonathan Stone, what would be? He looks like Betty White.
Yeah, you're having bad Wi-Fi issues. Breaking up a lot. Gallman is going to be there to get some carries here and there. He's not going to get, a ton with Barkley healthy. If Barkley's hamstring injury becomes something that lingers for a long time, then that may be something where, we start to see more and more of Gallman. But as long as Barkley is healthy, Barkley is going to be their dog.
Yeah, he will be their dog, but would you draft Gallman if you didn't own Barkley?
If I didn't own Barkley, no, I wouldn't draft Gallman because I just don't think he's going to have a lot of standalone value.
I agree with you, and I think it's going to be one of those situations where if something did happen to Barkley, Gallman will be a guy that will absolutely alleviate everybody's fab budget. And fab budget is something we're going to talk about a little later in the show today. It's interesting. One team that we haven't talked about much in the preseason is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Josh Rosen won't play in the final preseason game. Sam Bradford's going to start at quarterback there. I think Sam Bradford's going to get the nod to start the season. Larry Fitzgerald, David Johnson, is there anything other than those two players from a fantasy perspective?
Well, I think whoever lands the number 2 job is going to have some decent games. And, so far, I think that's going to end up being Christian Kirk. I just think he gives them something that they really don't have on their team. So I'd like to see him make that jump and become that number 2 there. I think with Fitzgerald on the other side, with Johnson in the backfield, I think that number 2 wide receiver role is going to definitely give some value as long as you can figure out which one it's really going to be.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So you're banking on Kirk. Is it a guy you drafted at all?
I have drafted some of Kirk. I've taken him really late because you can. That's the good thing about it. So I've taken him really late. I think he definitely could provide some value as the year goes on. I just don't know if it's going to be right from the get-go. So people that panic early, he's not a guy you want.
The Saints today made a move and acquired from the New York Jets quarterback Teddy Bridgewater for a 2019 6th-round pick. Actually, Bridgewater and the 6th-round pick go to the Jets for the 3rd-round pick in 2019. Great move, it seems, for Teddy Bridgewater's career with the 39-year-old Drew Brees there at the helm of the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, I think this is perfect for Bridgewater. Brees who knows how much longer, like you said, 39, who knows how much longer he's going to want to play. But Bridgewater definitely gives them an upgrade at the number 2 position. If Breeze misses any time to injury or anything, you have a starter in the NFL already there to back him up, and that's a good, solid thing for a team that wants to be in the playoff hunt.
They certainly do want to be in the playoff hunt, and it's going to be one of those things. How long Drew Brees continues to play, but we see it a lot of times, both with Brett Favre, both with Peyton Manning. Right? Once it ended real quick. I mean, in 1 year, they went from a top quality quarterback to nothing.
Well, in Peyton's, instance, we had the big injury that really, I think, kind of really pushed the end to the end. With Favre, I just think he got tired of sending out pictures of his junk to people.
Yeah, that was interesting, right? I mean, if people get bored, easy. Maybe it's something in New York because you had that with the congressman as well.
Well, there's probably a lot of that in New York. There's no doubt about it. New York is full of interesting people, let's just say.
Yeah, that's an interesting state, New York. Of course, we're still hearing the rumors on Randall Cobb. According to Mike Lombardi, anyone that will take Randall Cobb is welcome to Green Bay. And it leads to the point that even if he doesn't get traded, he is probably going to be cut by the Green Bay Packers and save the team $8.6 million in salary. So that being said, who are the wide receivers other than Davante Adams that you?
Well, look, it actually saves them over $9 million if they cut him this year. And if you're an NFL team and know that the Packers aren't looking to keep Cobb into the season, there's no reason you're going to trade for him at that dollar amount. You're going to wait till they cut him and then try and grab him at that point as on the waiver wire and hope you get lucky. Let's face it, nobody wants to pay that kind of money for a guy with his pedigree, going to catch you 600 yards a year and then always have the foot injury problem to deal with. So nobody's going to want to pay that. They're going to wait till they cut him and then try and do something with it. And as far as the wide receivers are, they got a load of young wide receivers that they really like. I mean, let's face it. First of all, you got the one that everybody's been talking about, Geronimo Allison. You got Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's had a really good preseason. You got the journeyman Jake Kumaro, who's looked good for them. You got Equanimus St. Brown and Jamon Moore. They drafted this year. It gives them a lot of young talent. And you know what? Any one of these guys can give them 600 yards.
Yeah, I think it's going to be getting the hot one out of the gate as you jump there. Aaron Rodgers was rewarded with a contract that guarantees him $100 million and $136 million over 4 years. So Aaron Rodgers gets paid. And if any guy deserves to be paid, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Nobody's going to fault you for that, making that payment. The bigger news to me, I thought was interesting, was the fact that the Packers sent Brent Hundley over to Seattle, and now all of a sudden you got DeShone Kizer as the number 2 in Green Bay. If something happens to Aaron this year, all of a sudden DeShone Kizer is a starter in Green Bay again.
I'll tell you what, it's interesting because I thought DeShone Kizer has looked really good in preseason, and I'm saying to myself, damn, the Browns took this guy early. Then they let him go in one season after throwing him out there too early. And now he doesn't look bad. This would be a typical Browns move.
Yeah, it would be a typical Browns move, no doubt about it. If this kid goes on and all of a sudden has a really good career. And, I think he's got it in him. He had some raw points. We knew that coming out of the draft, that this kid was raw. He had some issues that needed to be fixed, and including some work on his mechanics, let's face it. So, with Green Bay behind Aaron Rodgers, he could definitely get that help and learn to fix those problems. And at this point, if something happens to Rodgers, we're going to see a lot more DeShone Kizer.
I got to be honest, Jim. Sometimes Pete Carroll confuses me with some of the situations he does and some of the calls he makes and some of the plays he makes. And that didn't change today. The Seattle Seahawks give Tyler Lockett 3 years, $31 million. I'll tell you right now, I picked this guy on almost all my teams in the 5th round 2 years ago and was extremely disappointed. Last year, I waited, got him late. It didn't matter. He didn't do anything. Is this guy ever going to be anything?
Well, it's hard to say at this point. definitely seems to get injured a lot, misses too many games. He's got talent. We've seen him flash numerous times. He's just never been able to put a full season together. And, maybe this will be that point. We've seen guys who have come out of the gate first 2-3 years, not done anything, and then all of a sudden turn it around. I mean, if you look back at Michael Crabtree when he first came out, he didn't do anything for a while. Everybody was close to calling him a bust. And now he's got a pretty nice career in the NFL and has turned into a pretty good wide receiver. So, sometimes guys just need a little bit longer to develop into this game.
No, that is a good point on your part, as he absolutely turned it around. Now, of course, the Vikings in a situation there at the running back, and we've talked about Dalvin Cook at length, and we talked about the Vikings and their wide receivers. Adam Thielen left practice with an injury. Now, we talked about how there's been very little injuries. I don't have any other update on Adam Thielen. This is coming into Labor Day weekend, where we've got a lot of drafts going on.
Well, they actually did come out and say a little while later that it looked like he was fine and that he should be good to go, maybe a day-to-day type of thing. So I don't really think it's anything to be concerned about. I haven't moved him down. I'm not really worried about him in any way. So I don't expect people to really overreact to this. But, if they do, then it just works to your advantage if you're the one not overreacting.
So if you want Adam Thielen on your team, do you show up at the draft and say, man, I hope Thielen's okay, man?
Yeah, of course. You got to talk it up any way you can. Yeah, man. I can't tell you how many times I've used that to my advantage, telling somebody that, somebody I really wanted was, had some issues that they maybe didn't know about because they weren't keeping up to date on news. Yeah, you got to do all that stuff. Head games are a big part of the drafting action when you're doing a live in-person draft. It doesn't really work so easily on the internet.
Yeah, so if you're doing a live in-person draft, do you feel like that you should wear a jersey to that draft? Like, should you wear a jersey of a team and a player and showing your allegiance to a team or player? Or can that do something that'll harm you?
No, it did. I mean, let's face it. I don't worry about that. One of the reasons I do so many drafts I do is so that I'm ready to move to the next player available at any time. Nothing shocks me. People say, "Oh, they just sniped my pick." I don't really feel that way because I always have somebody next ready to go. So I really will be ready to go at all times. So that kind of thing doesn't really throw me off my game, and I'm never really locked into any one player going into a draft.
Play it safe. Wear a Tebow jersey to your draft.
Yeah, a Mets Tebow jersey. There you
A Mets
go.
Tebow jersey, and you'll have Jesus on your side as well. I like to draft with Jesus on my side.
Well, I don't care. I really don't want to get into any religious discussion, so we'll pan that one for now. But let's see what else you got on the news. Uh-oh, did we lose Tony? Oh, there he is.
the the preacher Jesus. I was talking about my gardener Jesus.
Oh, okay. Jesus, you mean?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Sometimes I confuse those guys every once in a while. Jesus, get out there, make the daisies grow. Jesus. That's what I want to go. I'll tell you what's interesting. If these guys turn out to be anything, you're getting a bargain on them. It's both the Denver Broncos wide receivers, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. You got to change a quarterback this year, of course, in Denver. Both these guys are forgotten, and Demaryius Thomas is nowhere close to the elite wide receiver he once was, or is he, Jim?
Hey, I like both of these guys this year. First of all, I think the upgraded quarterback is immense. We saw what Keenan could do last year. He did a great job in Minnesota. I was really surprised they let him go. I think he brings something to the table that they haven't seen since Peyton Manning left. And I'm not saying he's as good as Peyton Manning, but since Peyton Manning has left, they haven't had anybody there that could really fling the ball around the field. I think Keenan gives them that. I think both of these guys are guys that I have a ton of shares of both. Demaryius Thomas, I've been getting in the 5th round. I'll take that every day. Emmanuel Sanders been going in the 8th round in some drafts. To me, just ridiculous value.
Who started at quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles week 1?
Well, they're really pushing to try and get Wentz ready, but at this point, I just don't think I believe it. I think Foles is under center week one.
I do too. And is there any there's no situation in my mind where it makes any sense to draft Nick Foles just to play for 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wouldn't unless you're really, really in a serious bind at the beginning of the year. I really can't see you wanting to draft Foles for that. Unless there does there is a case for the fact of Wentz tries to come back too fast, too hard,
Yeah.
and ends up screwing himself, and Foles becomes the starter again. And with that offense, you got to love that. But he really does need Wentz to go down for any length of time for that to work.
And, but it does on the other side. Carson, I believe in Carson Wentz, quarterback. Here's the thing, though. We talk about waiting on quarterbacks a lot of times when we talk about drafts. I don't see a reason to pick Carson Wentz. Even if he drops down to the 10th, 11th quarterback, yeah, you might get some value, right? But I'm not going to get a big value. I'm going to have a guy that's going to be a little rusty. I'm going to have a guy that's the injury there. I'm just in the attitude, I'll just pick someone else.
Well, I mean, that is definitely, you're right. I like Wentz. I think even if he misses week one, I think you still get a solid season out of the guy. It definitely hurts him a little bit with Alshon Jeffrey possibly missing. Well, we know they're saying at least the first 2 weeks. So maybe that's a good thing because there was talk of him going on the PUP list. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I do have a few shares of him as well. But, it's not like they don't have some other receivers here. Mike Wallace is the forgotten guy in fantasy. But yet this is a guy that will probably outshine a lot of these other kids that are being drafted ahead of him just because he can get it done. And the fact that Jeffrey is going to miss some time, Wallace is going to step right in as that outside starter.
It's interesting. Fantasy. It's going to be because I'm falling in love with some tight ends late in the draft. And he's not going so late anymore. But Ben Watson, the New Orleans Saints, is the guy that I've been targeting in a lot of my drafts. And is this foolish? You hear he looks good, but we hear this every year about people. Oh, he looks great. He looks good. We've seen guys in that offense do well at the tight end position, but we've seen other guys go over there and not look well. What's your thoughts on Ben Watson? I'll tell you right now, I got him about 70% of my teams.
Well, you're talking to the guy who's been waving the Ben Watson flag since I got back into doing this work. So, yeah, I think he's in the perfect position. He's going back to the team where he had his best season ever in 2015. He's coming off a great season last year, 2017, where, everybody's, oh, he's so old. You know what? He didn't look old to me last year. He looked like he was out there to play. He's in New Orleans. He's, when he's on the field, he's looking good. He missed a little bit of prep time, but I don't think that hurts him at all. They know he knows this offense, and Breeze knows him. I love him. I think he's going to be a top 10 tight end. And the fact that you can get him, he's coming off the board is, last time I checked, is like the 19th tight end taken. And that, to me, that's just ludicrous.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think you can go in if you wait on tight ends and you pick a tight end late and have him as your tight end one. I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too. I've done that in quite a few leagues, and if I want to back up to him, if I've taken him that late and I want to back up to him, I love Dallas Goedert in Philly. I think Goddard is going to be an amazing surprise to people.
Yeah, he's starting to. I'll tell you what, he's starting to get a lot of action too there at the tight end position. Now, one of the things that is hard for fantasy owners, people new to fantasy, is believing everything you read. Now, you got to try to sift things out. You got to try to figure out there. We hear so much talk about how important Frank Gore is going to be the Miami Dolphins and how he's going to be brought into this offense and how Adam Gase is going to use Frank Gore. And then all of a sudden, Adam Gase says, you know what? Kenyon Drake's going to handle the ball 15 to 20 times a game, and he's going to catch 6 to 8 targets per game, which is the real story here. And is Kenyon Drake a little bit underrated coming into the season?
Well, I've been saying I like Drake. I think Drake's going to have a good, solid year. Gore's going to get his touches, but it's going to be limited to 7 to 10 touches a game, and he'll do a little damage here and there. But Drake is their guy. He showed last year that he can be that guy. He can do what they need him to do on all downs. So there's really not going to be any need to really limit his touches. I don't think to me, I want to see him on the field. I think they're going to want to see him on the field. And I think, the only thing that's really going to limit him is this offense.
Here's the only problem, and I agree with you, Kenny Drake, and I think I would draft him too. I don't have him on a team, but it's not because I didn't want him. It's just running backs are going early, and depending on where you draft, it's where you get them. But I think the one thing that could frustrate Kenny Drake owners, it wouldn't shock me if Frank Gore is the goal line back.
Yeah, but Frank Gore has really not done a lot of goal line work in the last couple of years. He hasn't really scored many touchdowns. So, I don't really think that's going to be a concern. Will he get a couple? Sure, I think he gets a couple. I don't think he gets enough to really hurt Drake. Drake is, a younger back who definitely still looks like he can get it done. Don't get me wrong, Gore has yet to look like he's ready to break down, but he's not the Gore of old.
Week 4, we talked about it earlier in the show where we shouldn't see much, but Saints coach Sean Payton says, I haven't seen much of Cameron Meredith. Meredith's the guy who was drafted early, I don't know, when we first drafted 6 months ago. And then I slowed down, and now I haven't probably drafted him in probably a month and a half. He's done nothing, and he's going to see quite a bit of work in week 4. What's your situation on Cameron Meredith, and can he sway with a strong performance in week 4?
I don't think he's really going to sway me with a strong performance. Like you, I thought he was coming over into a good slot here in New Orleans, and I thought he had a good shot, but he did miss way too much time. I think at this point he's fighting for a roster spot. Traquan Smith, the rookie that they drafted, has been looking amazing, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he slides into that number 2 role opposite Mike Thomas.
Everybody's taken for granted, including me. Le'Veon Bell will be back week 1, and there's a report out that Le'Veon Bell would join the Steelers on Labor Day, and Le'Veon Bell went to Twitter and said it's fake news. Have you ever thought about this guy not being ready for week 1?
I have. I've been telling people all along. It's nothing factual. There's nothing I can point at. It's just a really bad feeling I have that he is so desperate to prove a point that I would not be surprised at all if he holds out into the season and misses some time. So I've been really like trying to stay away from Bell. And, you hate to do that with somebody of his talent. But at this point, not only has he missed all of camp and may get off to a slow start if he does come back, but there is a chance in my mind that he holds out and misses a couple of games trying to get paid.
Here's the crazy thing. The way the NFL works, right, is if Le'Veon Bell wanted to be a dick, he could sign.
He is a dick. There's no doubt about it. He is.
He could sign a contract Saturday night, right, before week 1. He could show up to play and tell the Steelers he's ready to go. He could play the first play, and he could come out of the game with an injury, right? Then the Steelers either have to pay him or cut him. And who's to say that he wouldn't do such a thing?
Yeah, no, it's possible. Anything is possible in this league. Once all this crap comes out. I mean, James Conner's look good, and if they feel like they take less headache, if they save money on the salary cap, and I don't know what that number would be, I'd have to go look that up. But if that really comes down to fruition, look, this guy, while being a generational talent, has been a royal pain in their ass.
Let me ask you about the generational talent. I got 2 things on that. First of all, I picked this guy with the 2nd pick in the draft a couple of weeks ago. And I'll tell you right now, I think it was a mistake. Even if he goes off and he gets 2,000 yards and 100 receptions, it's still, you don't confuse the result with the decision. The decision is, I had a chance to pick anybody in the draft except Todd Gurley, and I took a guy in a contract situation that isn't even part of a team right now. It was a mistake, whether he goes off or not. Second, is Le'Veon Bell really that good of a running back, or is it the Pittsburgh system with the running backs? We've seen other guys come in there and play well, Jim. And I wonder if Le'Veon Bell is the running back on the Cincinnati Bengals. Is he a superstar?
I think he is. I'm sorry. I love watching this kid play. I hate him off the field, and I think he's probably an ass. But I like watching him play. There's really no holes in his game. Great inside, great outside rushing, great receiver, great blitz pickup. There's really no holes in his game. And I think if he goes anywhere, I think he's successful. Maybe not as successful as he's been with Pittsburgh, but I think he's still definitely successful.
Pittsburgh Steelers. They always make it interesting for fantasy owners there. Of course, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of love for Juju Smith-Schuster this year.
Well, there is. People definitely bought into what he did last year as a rookie, and I can't blame him. I just don't know if what we saw last year is really going to increase much, and the fact that you have to draft him where you do, you're kind of expecting him for his ceiling to expand from last year, and I'm just not sure if we're going to see that, especially after we've seen the playmaking of James Washington in the preseason. This kid is just going out there, not only before the preseason games, when he was in camp, he was making play after play after play. And then we get into the preseason games and he's still making those plays. I think he's going to be good enough to siphon some of that work from Juju.
I'll tell you what, Jim, one of the stories that we get down to as we get into drafts later in the year is the San Francisco running back situation, right? Jerick McKinnon, a calf injury, Matt Breida coming off the shoulder injury, and Alfred Morris getting the reps in the preseason. Now, Jim, you played some football. So Jerick McKinnon and Matt Breida were both working on the blocking. That thing absolutely kills you. So I think both these guys are ready. I think all three of these guys are ready. That means McKinnon goes back to where people were drafting him. But is Matt Breida draftable, and is Alfred Morris draftable?
I think Breida is going to be the early down guy. He'd probably get the goal line work. McKinnon is definitely, in my mind, not built to be an every down starter in this league. I think if he tries to be an every down starter in this league, he's going to be in the injury tent more than he's not. So, I think in this offense, he could be a killer in PPR leagues just by catching the ball, because I think he catches 70 balls in this offense. But if he's trying to do the early down work, or if he's trying to do goal line work, I think that really works not to his strengths, and it's going to hurt that team.
Yeah, that is going to be a situation there that I agree with you. And it was interesting with Jerick McKinnon, because everybody used to rave about him in Minnesota. And I was like, you know what? He reminds me of one of these guys that's a very good athlete, but not a football player, because he started playing football late in his career, and he was a track guy. And he reminded me of that. And I just think it's too much for him to be out there and expecting to get every down. Hell, we got football players that don't play every down in the running back position.
Yeah, no, we absolutely do. I don't know. It's going to be a tough situation. People, you're going to have to monitor it early, be ready to make changes on the fly. Anything is possible. And like I said early on, there's been so many questions that haven't been answered by preseason this year that it's really going to leave us all hanging come week one.
You mentioned Alshon Jeffrey, of course. I might miss the first two games this season. Who does that open up to? All of a sudden, Mac Hollins is a name that we see getting drafted.
Yeah, I like Mike Wallace more. People just sleep on Wallace. He's not the greatest receiver, and he's more of a 9-round type of guy where he's going to flash his speed and get that done. But he's also a little bit more reliable than Hollins at this point. I think Hollins can work into that role, but I think with Jeffrey being out early, I think we're going to see more Wallace than we are Hollins.
All right, the New England Patriots in the running back position has always been a problem for fantasy owners, and something strikes me that the Patriots might be playing possum with this Sonny Michel situation. He's been banged up. They're keeping him on the field. Why do I think week one we're going to see this guy get 20 carries?
Yeah, it's always possible. My favorite line has been this year is that Bill Belichick doesn't give a screw about your fantasy football team. And if he can mess with your head, he's going to mess with your head in any way, shape, or form. And while I love, Gronkowski there, and, I've taken plenty of shares of Brady here and there. Outside of that, Chris Hogan, a few, not as many as most others. But outside of that, I don't like touching New England running backs at all. I really don't like it. I just don't trust Belichick it's going to be a different guy pretty much every week doing something.
All right. I got to admit something now, because I'm going to admit it right here on air. So if I'm right, everyone will think I'm a genius. If I'm wrong, no one will remember because it's so ludicrous. I think Cordero Patterson might be a thing.
Oh, I don't think it's ludicrous at all. I think he's going to be a thing. I don't think he's going to be a thing you want in a season league where you have to manage it each and every week. But I love him in best ball because I think he's going to have 4 or 5 really good games where he catches maybe 3, 4 balls for 40 yards and 2 touchdowns type of game. Let's face it, he's definitely a red zone threat. He's also a guy who can do a lot with the ball in the open field. And, if anybody's going to find a way to make that useful, it's going to be Brady and Belichick.
Jim, here's the problem, though. Here's the problem why he shouldn't be a thing. I go back to when he was drafted, right? And everybody was in love with him, right? And I said, he doesn't even know the playbook. Like, this is back in college. He ran one route the whole time, right? And we've seen the Patriots bring, like, Chad Ochocinco in, and then all of a sudden he can't learn the Patriots playbook, right? He just stands on the sideline. So all of a sudden this kid that's been 5 years in the league can't learn anybody's playbook, but comes into one of the hardest offenses and all of a sudden excels. It makes no sense. But, Jim, that's what I'm feeling.
It's not that he's going to excel in their playbook. They're going to give him a very specific group of plays that are going to be geared towards him. And a lot of those are going to be geared towards the red zone, because he's big and strong and go up and fight for the ball. And with Gronkowski, their defenses are going to key on Gronkowski, and it should give him plenty of free opportunities in the red zone. So I think he's got a chance to catch 6, 7 touchdowns this year.
I used to be a guy that drafted Doug Baldwin, loved him when he was going in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. And he was Seattle's #1 wide receiver. But the last 2 years, that Dougie Baldwin hasn't been that guy. He's been the 2nd and 3rd round Dougie Baldwin. I've been staying away. And now when I hear players doubt themselves, it always makes me doubt them. Doug Baldwin says that his knee will never be 100% this season. Here's the truth. The truth is no NFL player that's played any part in this league for 4 or 5 years is ever going to be 100% because they're all banged up. But to hear a player say it, Jim, makes me alarmed.
Oh, absolutely. It's got to alarm me a little bit. I mean, we went through this with Chris Thompson about a month ago when he said he didn't think he was going to be fully healthy until a year after his injury, which was in November. And again, he looks healthy. He's running well in practice. But if that's in his head, that's still going to be a detriment and still could hurt. So if Baldwin has those doubts as well, I think if you still draft him that early, there is a cause for concern.
I got to tell you, cause for concern. You guys out there in fantasy football land, you won't admit who you are. You're going to hide behind the water fountain right now. But all you Marlon Mack guys, Marlon Mack should be starting running back for the Colts. Why do they keep putting Frank Gore out there? Why do they keep Robert Turbin? That's all I heard all last year. Now, we got a new coach in there, and Marlon Mack isn't guaranteed the job, but who do you like in the Colts backfield?
Absolutely nobody. I think, again, this is another situation where we're going to have different guys doing different things. I think it's going to be play script related, and you're going to have, different guys each week stepping up and doing something. So right now, this is another backfield that I'm really kind of staying away from. I honestly I don't think I have a single share of Marlon Mack.
Wow. Single share of Marlon Mack. I agree with you. I think it's a situation where that backfield is done. But who is the #2 wide receiver in the Colts that you're drafting? You won't T.Y. Hilton at all.
We got to get you a better Wi-Fi system. I didn't really hear anything except who is the #2 wide receiver in Indy, and I'm going to answer that and say Jack Doyle. Jack Doyle is going to be the clear #2 wide receiver in Indy. Just because he has a T-E after his name, don't believe it. He's going to be the #2 wide receiver. I mean, they're going in with Ryan Grant. Hey, Ryan Grant is one of those guys who, he'll have a 10-year career. He'll bounce around from team to team. He'll have a couple of years where he catches 45 balls or so and, that kind of thing. But he's never really shown me anything that makes me think he'll ever be anything more than that.
That's crazy. I totally agree with you. I think that's a great, great call. Guy that I drafted in the 1st round of a dynasty league is expected to be cut this week, according to ESPN, Jamison Hensley. Rashad Perryman, remember when he was the 1st round pick, surprising the Ravens, a guy with some speed. I drafted him in my dynasty league in the 1st round that year, and it's not going to work out.
Yeah, I didn't like him from the minute he came out. Just doesn't catch the ball well, doesn't catch it right. They kind of said that he really didn't have a big head on his shoulders. I like guys that can at least read. So that I've never been a Perryman guy from day one. If you go back and listen to the podcast when he was being drafted, I was dead set against him even then.
Jim Day, Tony Cincotta, Talking Fantasy Football, getting you ready for a season that's a couple weeks away. I can't finally believe it. Seems like the preseason takes forever. But Mike McCarthy, Green Bay Packers head coach, is raving about Jamal Williams and thinks he's poised to have a big year. It's a crowded Packers backfield, but can one guy take this backfield and run with it?
Boy, we keep touching on these backfields that I really don't want a major part of it all. Again, these are all questions that preseason has not answered for us, as in the past was answered by now. So, look, Jamal Williams, he's going to get first crack. There's no doubt about it. If he comes out of the gates really strong, he'll be able to continue that job. We just don't know at this point. I like Ty Montgomery for what he can do. I think he represents value to me in a PPR league because you can get him so much later and take a chance on him without really investing a lot of draft capital. But Jamal Williams, I always seem to find somebody else around him that I like more.
What's real interesting is the Houston Texans, because Will Fuller gets a lot of love from fantasy owners based on about 5 games with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. He won't be in preseason, but he'll be ready week 1 for the New England Patriots. What's Will
for the New England Patriots? You mean the Houston Texans, right? Oh, I think we lost Tony again. Come on, Tony, come back to us. Will Fuller. Okay, I'm going to talk about Will Fuller until we get Tony back. Look, I like Fuller as a flyer type of guy. Might be a good bye week filler. Might be a good guy.
I grew up in public in a place like this. My mom worked 3 jobs.
I don't know what it is.
Okay, then. Must be that Jacksonville Wireless out there. Look, I think he's a guy that he's not going to see the kind of numbers we saw him have last year. Five games, 7 touchdowns. That's definitely a regression number. He's going to come back to the mean. But I still think if we get 16 games out of Watson, 16 games out of him, I think this kid is definitely somebody who could walk right into the wide receiver 3 discussion for next year easily.
Wow, I feel bad for poor Cleveland Browns linebacker Michael Kendricks, who is on his out of the league, signs a 1-year deal with Cleveland, and he had some insider trading, and the Browns just cut him tonight, so he's out of football because of some insider trading.
Yeah, it doesn't look good for him. The first thing I said was he could face 45 years in jail, but he's already admitted he did it. He wants to pay restitution. So with a good lawyer, he may still see a little jail time. It won't be 45 years, but these kids make all kinds of bad decisions, and when you're in that kind of environment where you have people around you that are always trying to look for some way to get in and make more money or do this or do that, things are going to happen like this. And you feel bad for the kid because I liked him when he played in Philly. I thought he was an excellent linebacker. I was hoping he'd do something in Cleveland, but this is just, one of those things that I don't think he ever steps on an NFL field again.
Here's the problem I have with this thing. I look at the Cleveland Browns, right? And you drafted Johnny Manziel. You put up with Johnny Manziel. Mm-hmm. You brought back Josh Gordon time after time, and you're really going to cut a guy for insider trading? I mean, if he went to jail or something, I could see that. But, hell, he admitted he did wrong, and he's going to go to court. What the hell's the big problem here?
Well, because he's probably also going to get suspended by the NFL because he will, because he said he did wrong while he was playing. So the NFL will definitely suspend him on this. It's not like they're waiting to see if he was guilty or not. He's admitted he's guilty, so they will definitely suspend him for some time.
It sounds like a guy you work with.
Well, we won't go there.
We'll change the subject on that. Hey, we got some emails, of course, over on Facebook. You can go to Fantasy Football Talk, and I'll tell you what. Here's the thing. Everybody does their research in different ways. You get fine podcasts, you get magazines, you go to Twitter. But what you can do is go to Fantasy Football Talk, and you can go there, and you can read all day and answer comments. There's some polls. Jim has
better Wi-Fi than Tony. Jim has better Wi-Fi than Tony. Sorry, Tony, but your Wi-Fi is definitely waking out today. Yeah, Fantasy Football Talk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
How do you know it's mine?
Because it's on your side. Your voice keeps wigging out like crazy.
Right.
And I actually don't I don't use a Wi-Fi for my shows. I actually have a hardwired connection. Just because I don't trust Wi-Fi. So that is what it is. But damn, now I forgot what we were talking about. Old age is a bitch.
We're talking about Fantasy Football Talk.
Yeah, Fantasy Football Talk. Hey, this group is growing every day. We're over 700 members now. We get almost 100 new members a week. And everybody's involved. We get a lot of great discussions, people putting in their drafts, and a lot of people commenting on them. I try to comment on every single one, but we're getting so big, it's getting even hard for me to do that. Although I did have to, I had to dispatch my second person from the group yesterday. A guy comes in, I let him into the group. Next thing I know, he's posting spam all over to try and get everybody to go join his group because it's so much better than our group. And, our group is lame compared to his. And, if he would have just come ask people come to his group, I'd have no problem with that. I don't care what group people come to, whatever you want to do. That's what it's for. But to come into our group and badmouth our group while trying to promote his group, it didn't sit well with me. So now we have 2 people I've kicked out of the group so far out of 730 something.
2 people. Don't be number 3. Don't be number 3 out there. Jim, we had some questions from the people at Fantasy Football Talk. You guys fire questions in there every week and we'll answer them.
Okay, but before we get to the question, I do want to say one thing now. We are now on iTunes. I hope by next week to have us on a few more platforms, but we are now on iTunes as a full video podcast, not just the audio. So you get to see our ugly faces on iTunes for all you lucky people. But we do ask, first of all, if you're in YouTube, please, give us a thumbs up if you listen to the show. Give us a comment. Subscribe to the channel. We're so new with this podcast that we need to get growing, and the only way we can do that is by asking you people to help us. If you listen to us on iTunes, feel free to give us a ranking, give a comment there. The more you can do, the better for us. We appreciate everything you guys can do. It definitely helps us get this show going. So let's go over to the Facebook Live group, and I will go through some of these questions we got here. Nick Ficarella II wants to know, 3rd pick in the first round, he thinks Gurley and Bell are off the board. He wants to know, are you taking DJ or Zeke? Or would you swerve to take someone else in the 3rd pick right now today if you were drafting?
I would swerve. And I think there's 2 players that I could take at this point. Well, you can take those 2 players. There's a bunch of players you could take. But I think I would swerve, and I would take I think you could go ahead if you wanted to in the PPR league and take Antonio Brown. I would not do it. I think he's the best player at his position. That being said, I think the running back position is so thin, you have to go running back if that opportunity presents itself. I would actually go Alvin Kamara. I like the way the Saints used him last year. I think the first 4 weeks of the season, he's going to be used even more with the suspension of Ingram. And it was interesting last year how that Ingram, despite a great season, would find his way in the doghouse every once in a while. I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara at number 3.
Ooh, that's risky for me. Look, Kamara had an outstanding year, but his numbers, his metrics were so high that I just can't see them not coming back down to earth. He averaged over 6 yards a carry last year. It's only been done a couple of times in the modern era at all for somebody over a full season. I don't think he can hold up to that kind of number again. I still think he's going to have a great season. But for me, look, I'm taking David Johnson there at number 3, 90% of the time. Look, the guy didn't have any problem with his legs. He had a wrist injury. So, the wrist is fine. He's ready to go. I don't think there's anything holding him back. I mean, lots of questions there in Arizona, of course. New coaches, offensive line is struggling, but it doesn't matter with him. I don't think it matters. There's just some guys who make their own holes, and I think he's one of them. So I like him a lot at that number 3 spot.
Let me ask about Johnson because, like you mentioned, I think there's a lot of question marks. I think, one, you mentioned the coaching staff. One, you mentioned the offensive line, so you're right there. But last year we saw him get hurt. This is a guy that played every down, right? Every down. Do you think that the coaching staff says, hey, this guy's too good? You saw how bad Arizona was without him, that they got to get somebody else on the field with them.
Well, I think they will. I think they do. I think Chase Edmonds is a guy that they like a lot, and he's looked really well. If anything happens to David Johnson, I think Chase Edmonds gives them a really nice backup. And I also think he does start to see a little carries here and there, but I don't think he does enough to really take the ball out of David Johnson's hands enough for him not to finish as a top 5 running back.
Interesting. God, I'll tell you what, if you get the old David Johnson, get him number 3, get a bargain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you want to try and get somebody up there that has a chance to be number 1, and he's definitely done it. So it's not a bad feel. And again, it's not like we're dealing with somebody who had a leg injury last year. It was a wrist. It was a bad wrist, but it was a wrist. So his legs are still fine. He's got something to prove. He wants to prove it again. And I love players like that who got that chip on their shoulder. So I definitely think he's a guy I like. Let's go on to the next one. This is a little bit different, something we don't normally talk about, but Matthew Stresley, he wants to know if you're in a league that limits the amount of moves you can make per year. In his league, he has 9 moves he can make throughout the season, like free agent moves, things like that. Does that change how you draft if you know you only have a limited number of moves to make during the season?
Here's the crazy part. We talked about this prior to the show, people. And I said, no, it wouldn't. But the answer is yes, it would. And here's the reason I thought about Jim after the fact. When I draft, I pay no attention whatsoever to the bye weeks. 0. And in fact, when the draft's over, say I find out all my guys have a bye week in week 7, I love it. Because you know what it tells me? I'm only going to be week 1 week of the year. But in this system, if I have 3 or 4 guys out in week 7 that start for me every week, that's going to be a problem if I use half my pickups for the whole year in that week 7. So I think I would pay a little attention to bye weeks, and that would be the only difference. So, Jim, I think it's a minor difference in the drafting.
Oh, that's a good, solid point. I do tend to watch bye weeks more in the fact that if I come across 2 players, let's say at the end of a tier for me, let's say wide receiver 3 tier, and I have 2 players left in that tier that I could draft, then at that point, I'm going to look at bye weeks of what I have already drafted and the 2 guys that are available, and that could make a sway for me one way or the other, as long as they're in the same tier. If they're in different tiers, then that doesn't come into play. But players in the same tiers, sometimes bye weeks come into that play.
Love it. We got more?
Yes, we do. We always have more. Let's see. Okay, Matt Spafford wants to know, let's say Bell reports before week 1. Do you believe the Steelers ease him back or give him a full workload from the get-go, or do they ease him in with a slow start? And then also he wants to know, do the Steelers run him into the ground and let him walk at the end of this year like the Cowboys did to DeMarco Murray in 2014? What say you?
I don't, for instance, believe that nobody knows what Le'Veon Bell is doing. Like, I believe that, like, Mike Tomlin realizes it's a business, and him and Le'Veon Bell talk every night, and they just don't tell us. Like, that's what I want to believe is actually happening here, right? So I think they know what he's doing. I think he plays week 1 like he's been at training camp the whole time, and I think the Steelers coach respect the fact that this is a guy that's got his whole career on the line. And he's going to throw him out there. He's going to play him like he was at practice every week. So will they run him to the ground? Not on purpose, but they're going to run him as much as they can, and they're not going to be worried about the future. They're going to get everything they can out of this guy.
No, and I agree. I think they do run him into the ground. There's no reason to hold back at this point. I don't think they give him a long-term contract. I don't think they bring him back. We've seen the Steelers do that with other players before. When they think you're done or you're just not worth the effort, then they're going to pass on you and move you along. And I think that's what we're going to see with Bell. So yeah, I think this year, once he gets in, they may start him a little slow, but I don't think that really impacts him. I think the slow start may be due to rustiness, not getting any playing time in the preseason. But that, as we saw last year, reverses itself quite quickly. I think down the second half of the season, I think they run his wheels right off.
With all the baseball nerds now becoming in the front offices of these football teams, and you're getting all these analytics involved in football, you're never going to see a running back get a long contract after he's been in the league 4 or 5 years. Every one of these nerds look at the production of running backs falling off at 4.5 years, and there's no way in hell anyone's going to get a big contract from one of these nerds in the front office. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have a nerd, and most of the teams have a nerd, but you'll have teams like the Bengals that have the old traditional, and you have Jerry Jones down in Dallas and a few of those guys. Le'Veon Bell's going to have to hit up one of those teams. He's going to get paid, but it won't be by the Steelers.
No, and I agree with that. Somebody will definitely pay him. I just don't think it will be the Steelers. I think they feel strong enough in James Conner that they can make that work and, go out and get somebody else if they need to.
What else we got?
Let's see. Okay. Next one. Brad, walk.
I got. You just made me think of something with James Conner. This is an interesting fact for all you people out there. The Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? He was not the original guy that they were going to plan on using it. The first guy that they made the movie for was O.J. Simpson. And what happened was, and I can't remember who the director of that was, said, "Are you kidding me? You're not going to have a black guy going through Los Angeles killing people, right?" And can you imagine O.J. Simpson was supposed to be the Terminator?
That would have been wild. That whole thing makes me think. I see this meme on Facebook every once in a while of you see a picture of Howard Cosell standing next to O.J. Simpson and Bruce Jenner and say, "Folks, you're not going to believe what I have to tell you about these two." I love that. Every time I see that, I just start rolling. I think that's the greatest meme I've ever seen on Facebook. I love that.
One question before we move on. Does at this point, do you think Caitlyn Jenner pees standing up or sitting down?
I really could care less about Caitlyn Jenner and don't ever want to discuss her ever again. Hey, his choice. He did what he wanted to do. She did that's okay. Whatever they want to do is fine by me. I just don't need to see it and talk about it and don't really care for it.
But I wonder about that at night.
Well, there you go. That's why you're Tony Cincotta. There's no doubt about it. Look, people in the chat room want to know what our thoughts are on Dez Bryant. So I'm going to go with this. Look, I think Dez signs with somebody. I think he's waiting till the end of preseason to do it because he didn't want to deal with preseason at all. He's going to sign with somebody. I don't think it's going to be Cleveland. If Gordon is really back, if they still have concerns about Gordon, then maybe they sign him in Cleveland. But if Gordon is back, I don't think they sign him in Cleveland. To me, that would be a waste. Gordon at this point is a much better talent than Dez is. But I do think Dez will sign with somebody. I do think he has some value. I trust him more in a best ball league. I'll take a late flyer on him and have. In a standard weekly league, definitely a tougher call. But, there's definitely teams out there that could use a Dez Bryant. Let's face it. We've talked about a couple. Indy doesn't have a clear-cut number 2. Dez could be that guy opposite T.J. Hilton with defenses flocking to Hilton. Dez could have a season there. So, there's definitely a few teams. Arizona could use a clear-cut number 2. Bryce Butler doesn't scare really anybody. Christian Kirk could be that guy, but that's out of default. There's a couple other young kids they like there that could really step up. We don't know. So there's definitely some situation where Dez could land and have a decent season. I don't think he's totally done yet. I put him in that category of Jordy Nelson where everybody wrote Jordy Nelson off. I don't think Jordy Nelson is done either.
I like Jordy Nelson. Dez, the problem, you deal with a guy that is unpredictable. Like, he doesn't know what the hell's going on in his life. I don't know what's going to happen here. Here's the thing. Like, who does he have in his pocket that he's going to be back right after the week? Is it Cleveland? I mean, Philadelphia, you would think they would want him for a couple weeks and give him a shot, right? There's teams out there. Arizona, you mentioned, right? Who does he have that he's guaranteed to get a contract from? I agree with you. He could want to sit out the whole preseason, but who is the team that he is going to play for right away?
Well, I think he can play for Indy right away. Again, I think there's a couple other teams that could use him on.
Guy with no job that turned down $9 million.
Well, I'm not saying he's not an idiot.
No, I'm saying that's why we can't predict what will happen from him. I think he changes his mind every day.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the stuff that went down with him coming to Cleveland, I think, some of that was Cleveland trying to put pressure on Gordon to come in. There's so much unfolding there that I just don't think that's where he's going to end up. But I do think he ends up somewhere. I still think he can play in this league. I don't know. Last year was an aberration for me. I don't know if he's ever going to be the Des Bryant of old. I don't think he will be, I should say. But I do think that he could help a few teams in this league with what the situations they have at their wide receiver position.
Can I ask a crazy question? You think he wants to play for the Cowboys?
Yeah, actually, I would probably say he does not want to play for the Cowboys, and I'm pretty sure the Cowboys don't want him to play there either. But again, that's a situation where right now we have no clue what's going on with the Cowboys wide receiver group. So that's going to be another one where week 1, week 2 is going to start to give us some insight into what they're doing. By then, everybody's going to be scrambling for whoever's doing well. See, the thing with not knowing all of these teams and what their situations are is that it's going to really make it a scramble come week 1, week 2, when all of a sudden these guys come out of nowhere and have good weeks, and the waiver wires are just going to go nuts.
I'll tell you what, Jim, somebody's going to make a biggest mistake. If that happens, you're right? So let's say Des Bryant comes back. He's on the waiver wire, and people throw $80, $90 and $100 on it. That will be the biggest mistake you made, and it'll end your free agents for the whole season.
Yeah, and I can't see any reason to want to do that. There's no way I would put that kind of money on Des out of $100. It just wouldn't happen.
People, and you only need one person in the league to do it, right? One person, all it takes to do it, and someone will do it. And the thing is, he has a chance. He has as much chance to be a top 30 wide receiver as he will be getting cut 2 weeks later.
And I agree with that. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he could sign somewhere and just look dead, like Eric Decker did in New England. I liked Decker when he played, but he came in New England and his head was not in the game, dropping balls left and right. Definitely not what you want to do in New England. You're not going to stay there long like we saw. So, New England is a place where I think he could land. I don't think he does, but I wouldn't be surprised. They definitely could use another wide receiver there that they can count on.
It wouldn't shock me, and I was surprised they didn't get something done. It seemed like there was, a little love there for a beginning, but I don't know, and I can't see him bringing him in after the season starts.
Okay, now we got a couple more questions, so let's jump into them real quick. Brad Walker wants to know about the potential of John Kelly there, sitting behind Gurley in L.A. I like Kelly. Kelly's looked good. He's played well. I think he definitely gives them a nice backup if the need ever arises. But until Gurley goes down, Kelly's not going to see enough time to really be fantasy relevant.
No way. Catches the ball in the backfield, runs the ball. No way. I wouldn't even – Gurley looks so durable, I wouldn't even consider a handcuff situation.
Okay. Don Osborne wants to know about the Browns defensive unit, DST. Look, I say the same thing I say about every defensive unit. I don't care. I'll take whatever defensive unit is ready for me when I get to the point where I'm going to draft them last. Every year we see changeovers at the top defenses. It's only been one defense in the last 2 years that have even been in the top 5 both years, and that's Philadelphia. Everything else has been so hit or miss. You're either in the top 5, in the top 10, or you're not even in the top 12. So don't stress over defense. Take whichever defense falls to you late. Play the streaming game each and every week with matchups and stay with that. Don't get locked in. I see guys drafting these, Jacksonville defense. I saw a guy draft the Jacksonville defense the other day in the 9th round. I'm sorry. That's just nuts. I'm not going to get started again. I ranted about that last time, but just nuts to me. One last question, and then we got to go because it's about that time. Matthew Stressley wants to know again, how does your overall board change in a start one running back league with 2 flex spots? He also starts 2 wide receivers. So 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, and 2 flexes. Does that change your draft board at all?
I think so. It changes. I don't know my draft board, and the draft board would stay the same. But like I said, I have to pick a running back first, right? In the first couple of rounds because of the 2 running backs, not enough to go there. I would just take the best player available now, and it probably put Antonio Brown in the discussion for the number 1 pick in the draft.
And I could easily see that. There's no doubt about it. You're right. It would be, without the stress of having to start so many players, it is best player available at all times. Now, I usually tried to use best player available in almost all my drafts. So that doesn't really faze me all that much. So for me, it doesn't change my draft strategy one iota.
I've gone 2 running backs, Jim, in all my drafts this year for the first time I can remember in a long time. And I've tried to pick the best ball, and I don't think I've left, a wide receiver that's greatly better. It's just been a tiebreaker for me is that I go back to the running back position.
I have quite a few teams where, a draft, I have a late round 1 pick, and, the first 8 or 9 players are running backs except for Antonio Brown. If that many come off the board before me, I have no problem grabbing 2 stud wide receivers at the turn, OBJ and Nuke, or OBJ and Michael Thomas. I have no problem doing that, and then just come back to running backs 3, 4, 5, 6, even if I need to, knowing I have those 2 stud wide receivers to hold me over.
I love it. It's always gets down to the debate. You take the 10th or 11th best running back or the 3rd or 4th wide receiver.
Yeah, right. And that's it. You got to make your choice. But for me, at that point, if it's really heavy in the beginning, I'll take that wide receiver. So, I have no problem with that.
Jim, I got to tell you, another great show. Next week, we'll make sure, Jim, I got a little hard with me, and I'll stick it in a male-female situation, and we'll go from there.
That sounds good, Tony. We heard about half of that, so that'll work. Hey, guys, thanks for coming out and listening to us tonight. Again, like I said, if you can like us, can leave some comments, we definitely appreciate it. Anything you can do to help us grow, spread the word, we definitely appreciate that as well. And we hope to start having some guests coming up here real soon. It's just been really crazy for me lately trying to get that worked out. So we will have some definite guests here so we can get some alternate viewpoints on the show coming up real soon. Okay, we are out, folks. Thank you all and have a good night.